Hey, everybody. Hey. Whoa. That was a deep hey. All right. Good to see you. Al, I'm glad you made it here safely. Seems to be oddly foggy all day today. Like, all day long it's been foggy. What does it mean? Oh, okay. It's just foggy. But surely there's like some kind of farmer's almanac kind of meaning to it, right? Like it's about to be a hailstorm or something. What'd you say, the government? Let's not get into that conversation. Okay, 2 Peter chapter number 2 is where we are, verse number 12. Went through a good little clip of verses last time, so that was good. And we're on verse number 12. So, obviously, we want to just keep in mind that the context is false teachers. And that comes from verse number 1, okay? And so when he says in verse 12, but these, he's talking about the false teachers. All right, verse 12 says, but these, like natural brute beasts, made to be caught and destroyed, speak evil of the things they do not understand and will utterly perish in their own corruption. Now, pretty awful. Like he's going to really lay into these false teachers. And so all the way through like the rest of the chapter, through verse 22, it sounds a lot like you would think, if you didn't know better, you would think you're reading like an Old Testament prophet talking about sinful Israel. Really, I mean, it's that kind of language. At least that's what it reminds me of. There's not quite a passage like this one, really, like in verse 12, chapter 2 at all. But 12 through 22, really, it's going to be hard pressed to find a passage that comes close to how accusatory and how blunt and how detailed this passage is. Except for Jude. Now, we've said a couple of times already that 2 Peter 2 and Jude are very similar. And if you've heard me and you've gone over and just read Jude already since we've said that, then you obviously know that that's right. But so this is kind of somewhat unique. Other than Jude, it's very unique for the New Testament, the way he just presents all of this about these particular people. Now, let me ask you this. So, get you thinking a little bit. He's doing exactly so. You see verse 11, whereas angels who are greater in power and might, do not bring a reviling accusation against them before the Lord. And then, so he's saying these false teachers are doing what even angels won't do. And he uses the word accusation, and then he goes into a bunch of accusations. And so let me ask you, is Peter doing exactly what he just accused the false teacher of doing? Making reviling accusations. And if he's not making accusations, what is he doing? And if he is it any different than what he just accused people who are wrongdoing of doing? Okay. So maybe like that was very specific, while he is obviously not talking, he's not making accusations against the same kind of people. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. I mean, so there's that is a difference, right? Do y'all see that? Like on earth or what? Oh yeah, that's right. Don't you normally teach? That's right. The one person who's not in class, she gives an answer. Okay, well, what would be another big difference between the false teachers making accusations and then Peter making accusations?
Just the fact that they're false teachers.
Okay, so Peter's not a false teacher. Yeah. I mean, that's the big one, right? That's the big one. Peter obviously spoke by the Holy Spirit, and he spoke with that means he spoke with God's authority, and this is definitely something that the false teachers were not doing. And of course, Peter spoke with full knowledge of the truth, right? Jesus said that the Spirit was going to lead him and the apostles into all truth, and this is the kind of truth that he speaks and he writes with. And of course, that's something that nobody else, other than the apostles, nobody else would have done. Okay, so now we got that taken care of. And so he says they're natural brute beasts. So he's saying they're like animals. And the idea is that I would say that they're driven. Now he's going to make it a little bit more specific, but I want to include this, that I think this would mean that they're driven by their desires. And we know that these false teachers had they had an agenda that involved certain sins. And if that's not clear already, then we're gonna see it come out in this passage here. But so they're driven by their desires, and you know that. Like, who's got a dog here? Not cats, because cats are different. Okay, so you got a lot of people got dogs. Is your dog driven by desire, mainly for food? Pretty much. I mean, I suppose that some breeds are different and everything, but so we got 2 dogs. I love them to death, but really, they don't care about anything but food. Isn't that right, Megan? They just want food, huh? Oh, they care about Megan, of course, yeah. Megan number 1. Food number 2. Like anybody could come along and just steal my dogs as long as they got the right food. They don't care. Nothing else matters. And so, desire is a good thing. It's a good thing that we desire certain things. So it's not inherently sinful, and God gave us that. But it's a problem when desire becomes priority number 1, and then our desire drives everything we do instead of us. Like our desires have control over us instead of us having control over our desires, right? And so, like natural brute beasts, then very specific, made to be caught and destroyed. So he's talking about animals that kind of like farm animals, just raised only to be slaughtered, and that's what he's comparing these false teachers to. And I think maybe just the real easy point that he's making is that their end is not good. The end of these false teachers are not good. He's going to kind of say that over and over and over again, all the way through 22. Then he says they're talking about, or they're speaking evil of the things they don't understand. Now, I don't believe he's saying they're just babbling, like incoherent rambling, which you got to admit that there's some people who speak religion, even preachers, that's pretty much, what goes on, incoherent rambling. I mean, I've seen it I've heard it with my own ears and seen it with my own eyes, but I think this would be claiming some kind of greater knowledge about New Testament things, or kind of making up their own truth and proclaiming it as gospel. Like, yeah, I know what the Bible says, and I know what someone might come along and say the traditional interpretation is, but let me tell you what it really means, because I have been enlightened. And they'll say, this is what it really means, and trying to wow the people and get them over on their side kind of thing. The idea of promising something better, but actually only offering something inferior, not doing any good. And that theme is going to come up again in this passage. So we know, and I think maybe this is part of what Peter's trying to do. Obviously, when Christians are expected to think about these things when they're reading these letters, and I note this just same today as it was back then, we are not free to make up our own set of morals and our own set of, our own ethical code, so we can get away with whatever we want. And that's pretty much, a lot of times when people get wrapped up in sin, especially Christians who fall away from the church, that's kind of what they're doing. They're kind of like Yeah, they're making up their own moral code, kind of taking the parts of God's ethical code and then putting and meshing it with theirs, and then make their own things so they can get in their own head, so they can sleep at night and get and do whatever and live however they want to do. And God is calling, I would say, God, that's blasphemy. That's to speak evil of the things. That's speaking evil. That's the word blaspheme there. And so for these things, they're going to be judged. They're going to utterly perish in their own corruption. All right, verse 13 says, and will receive the wages of unrighteousness as those who count it pleasure to carouse in the daytime. They are spots and blemishes, carousing in their own deceptions while they feast with you. So the wages of unrighteousness, that's what is due to those who live in sin. That's Romans 6 and verse 23, where it says, for the wages of sin is death. There's kind of like does it ever bother you that when you know people are living in sin, and maybe not even people who you love or who are close to you, and you probably know some people like that too, who are living in sin, who are not saved. Does it ever bother you that if things don't change, like how things are going to end up?
Yes.
I mean, I'm really expecting like everybody to, at least in their head, be like, yeah. I don't know how it doesn't.
People that have already passed.
Yes.
About them as well.
Yeah. We kind of talked about that a little bit, like a month ago or so.
But what's the worst about it is it doesn't bother them any. But you know the outcome.
Yeah, they're kind of blinded, right?
And you can tell them and you can encourage them, but they just go on, it's just another day.
Yeah, and so there's like this inevitability that kind of surrounds people who are lost, and with these false teachers as well. Really, anyone living in sin, there's this inevitability that really it tends to make the faithful, people who are actually striving to live and do what's right, and for Christians who know what's right, what we all need to do, it kind of makes them sick a little bit. It's kind of sick to your stomach, not in a disgusting way, but almost like, I don't know if this is the right word, but kind of like you pity them because of what is coming to them. They will receive the wages of unrighteousness. And that Romans passage says it's death, and that's not good. That's spiritual death, which will be for an eternity. This idea of counting it pleasure to carouse in the daytime. What did you think about when you read that? What does that mean to you? Maybe reading it for the first time. They count it pleasure to carouse in the daytime, and you're King James, so maybe you got it words it a little differently in your Bible.
Wouldn't that mean they're bold? Instead of doing it at nighttime, they're now doing it in the daytime?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the idea there. Whatever it is. Go ahead, Marshall.
I was gonna say, I guess the way I'm looking at it, the way I'm interpreting is that they're not hiding, they have their shame, and
Yeah, I think.
For everybody to see. I know that's kind of
Yep.
what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree with y'all. No shame, just kind of indulging in whatever sin it may be. You know, I think there's this idea that comes through when you read through the Bible, even in the Proverbs. But maybe I think we can see how this makes sense today. That a lot of sinful things kind of happen don't they happen like in the night, like at night, like?
People,
I mean, not everybody, but
they can't be
or every
seen.
sin.
They can't be seen. That's why
That's the idea. Yeah.
That's why burglar breaks in of the night. That's why, if a man's going to cheat on his wife, he's going to go out with the woman or vice versa.
Yeah. So
hopefully
the cover of night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of provides like a little bit of a shelter, a little bit of secrecy, and that's kind of the idea. kind of sin is wrapped up in that, in a lot of secrecy.
But in Rome, when it was so bad, they were in the middle of the street, just doing whatever, wherever, in the daylight. It
Yeah.
just didn't bother.
So you can see how it gets like, so in a somewhat, if we could just picture a somewhat moral culture, that's not going to be perfect. And so you're going to have people doing things they shouldn't. You're going to, you imagine, well, you don't do that. People do that around here, but they don't do it in the daytime. They don't do it out in the open, And, but as the culture gets worse and worse and worse, well, things, you start, Jeremiah 6, you start losing the ability to blush at things, and all of a sudden, what is only nighttime appropriate starts being happening in the daytime. If that makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of out in the open, no shame. Eddie.
That's kind of the way that culture has changed now, is things that people, 20, 30 years ago would be like, man, that's prime time TV now, it's not the after hours stuff, it's just the normal, we're putting that up on a pedestal now. That's what you want to watch, that's the entertainment, it's what sells, whatever it is, pick your poison. That's the normal now, that's no longer, it's kind of this, it's in the daytime.
Yeah, we're only in our 30s and 40s. I mean, I imagine that people in their 70s and their 80s have seen the change from bad to worse, even more than our generation has, Yeah.
From Herman Monster to 2.5 Men. It's really, it's changed so drastically. You can't turn the TV on and watch anything.
No.
We end up watching old game shows.
Yeah.
And, they're pretty much.
Yeah. Even those old 70s game shows, you gotta watch them sometimes. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Like we used to watch, what's that old show? The Andy Griffith Show? Is that what it's called? Yeah, we used to watch that, That was fun. And the kids loved it. They thought what's that one goofy guy's name? No, the other one. Barney Fife. There must be a lot of goofballs on that show. More than one goofball. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, sorry to go off there. But, so obviously things have changed, right? I would say that this was probably this idea of carousing in the daytime probably referred to drunkenness. I would say at least included this. You remember in Acts chapter 2, Peter and the apostles started to speak in different languages, and the people were like, "What? I'm out from all over. I'm from such and such a place, and I'm hearing them speak in my own native tongue. How is this possible?" And someone accuses them of what? Yeah, they're being drunk. Yeah. So Peter had to kind of shut the note in the daytime, drunk in the daytime. And I think that gives us the idea that culturally, no, we don't do that around here. Only like degenerates do that, And so Peter had to shut that notion down. So generally, people condemn drunkenness during the day, and I think this would at least be perhaps involved in this. Let's see if I got this verse right.
That's the one thing about a drunk. He normally can't even speak the language in which he knows.
That's true. 1 Thessalonians 5:7 says, "For those who sleep at night, and those who get drunk are drunk at night." Well, how about that? Yeah. The King James, I think instead of carousing, or maybe as those who count it pleasure, to carouse. Is that what it says? That word pleasure is the Greek word hedone or hedoni. It's where we get our word hedonism from. And so if you haven't had, what that speaks to. And so this idea, whatever it is, I would say certainly include drunkenness, but it speaks to all this kind of self-indulgence of whatever pleasure, whatever floats your boat kind of thing, all kinds of vices there. So Peter he talks about this daytime thing. And so far, he has spoken about the gospel being, so if you look at 1:19, see 1:19 there? He talks about the gospel being this light that shines in a dark place. And then you look at chapter 2 and verse 4. We've got angels in chains of darkness. And in chapter 2 and verse 17, we haven't got to yet, he's going to mention darkness again, the blackness of darkness. All right, so we got that little theme, repetitious theme going. And we know, like, all over the Bible, there's this light and dark theme all over the Bible. And so this is how brazen, this is how bold these false teachers are. Even in the, see if this makes sense, even in the full light of, or the light of the full knowledge of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that's in the church, this light from the gospel, it's in the church, it's spreading over the world so quickly. And these, in that light, these false teachers are still engaging in things that are only appropriate in the dark corners of the non-Christian world. They're bringing that into the light of the church. And that's a bad thing. Uh, 13b, let's say there are spots and blemishes, carousing in their own deceptions while they feast with you Christians, with you the church. So these false teachers are in there and in the church, and they're corrupting the church. It made me think, why in the world didn't these Christians get them out? Why is it taking a letter from Paul to wake them up? Like, what are they doing? And maybe this is 13, verse 13 at the end there, 13b. This is Peter calling the church out for failing to do what they should have done, and kind of like pushing them, like, you got to get these people out of here. They shouldn't be feasting with you. Because if sin is in the church, maybe not everybody's practicing that sin, but they're tolerating that sin. Well, I think the idea is that everybody else, we might as well just be joining all into it, because we're all going to be held accountable for it. And at least to the world, that's how it looks.
But it'll say, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah, throw your hands up. Well, we just, can't beat them, join them.
Everybody's doing it.
Yeah, just go with the majority, yeah. So obviously we want to make sure that we're not that kind of congregation. If there's sin, someone practicing sin or living in sin, what are we going to do? Just ignore it? Just let it rot the congregation from the inside out? And also smear the name of Christ in the community? I don't think so. And it's a shame that some congregations are doing that. For a fact, they're doing it. Any comments? Go ahead.
Just thinking about, like how that happens. Not really making excuses or anything, but, I think that if someone were to come in here and just blatantly start like teaching false things out in the open right off the bat, we would all probably put our foot down and be like, that's not right. But, he starts off this chapter, saying that they'll be,
Secretly brought in?
Yeah, secretly. And so it kind of happens under the radar. And then, as you see a lot of times, what happens in the church is when sin kind of just comes in. And then when you realize it's happening, you realize it's been going on for so long. And then it's like, now what do we do? Or it's
it can be tough.
To address, or we're more reluctant to address it.
Yeah, it's true. This is the early church, and so, they didn't have scriptures like we're reading now. to kind of prepare ourselves, prepare our minds, and the leadership can prepare. That this has happened in the past before, it can happen again, and I mean, I guess we could give them a little grace, right? But when you know, right? When it's brought to your attention, you can't just not do something. Can't just not do something, right? You gotta do something. Well, you gotta have bold. You gotta be bold, but at the same time, you can't be aggressive, I guess, to a fault. You can't be evil spirited about things, but you guys want leadership here or a preacher here who's scared? Who's scared to say something? Would have fired me a long time ago. Verse 14, he keeps on going, comma, they feast with you, comma. Verse 14, having eyes full of adultery, and that cannot cease from sin, enticing unstable souls. They have a heart trained in covetous practices and are accursed children. Peter's like, is he just describing their behavior, or is he describing their actual false teaching? Maybe both. But definitely kind of leans towards, he's just describing what kind of awful people they are, their behavior. It's like that alone is enough to get them out. But it could be that the two kind of go hand in hand, at least for these kind of false teachers. Their behavior is just a tell of what they actually believe and what they're teaching and trying to get other people to do. So this eyes full of adultery maybe reminds us of Matthew 5 verse 8. Jesus says, I say to you, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So taken in the strictest sense, right? Eyes full of adultery. It's like to me, see if you can add something to it or correct me, that these teachers can't even look at a woman in the right way. Eyes full of adultery. They don't see a human being, a female soul. They see a potential bed partner, married or not. Is that the right way for men to be looking at women? Go ahead.
Or it could be like Solomon and Gomorrah.
Yeah,
they weren't looking at women, they were looking at men.
Well, yeah, that's true. Considering adultery is always usually about male, female, then that's probably what it is. So, but yeah, you're right. So always looking at women. I mean, this is it. Like never as a soul, just an object. And so the idea is like these women, we say sexual predators, and we're usually talking about like pedophiles. But can't you be like removed from our cultural context? Can't a sexual predator be someone who's always just trying to sleep with other men's wives? I would say so. That's a predator. These men are just not safe to be around. And then it says they cannot cease. It's like they cannot cease from sin. It's like a drug. Now either that's talking about that's talking about addiction to this kind of lifestyle. Or it could be that they're so far gone, their hearts are so hardened, and their consciences are so seared that that's it. Like sin is their life from this point on, no matter what. And they obviously spoke of things that were enticing to people, to Christians. The King James uses the word beguiling. But he's going to use the same word that's translated beguile. I think it's beguile or beguiling. In verse 18, and if you just glance at verse 18 and you see the word allure, Allure, it's the same word. To allure, entice. The word actually means to entrap. So it's not like That's almost a little bit of a difference, because what I think entice is just like, hey, come, look how good this thing is, but there's like a motive behind it. Like, come and engage yourself in this thing, and yeah, you might find it pleasurable, but I have a secret motive. Like, you know what I mean? It's the idea of baiting a hook. That's what the word means, to take or catch with bait. And of course, Peter's profession was what? He was a fisherman. I'm pretty sure Peter had beguiled a few fish in his day. And he knows, or enticed many a fish. And, so we can picture that. That tells us kind of what the false teachers were doing. The ultimate end for the thing, the person that takes the bait, is not something good for them. It's only good for the one who's doing the baiting, not the one who takes the bait. That's bad. You get eaten. And I suppose that sin wouldn't be sin unless there was some level of temptation behind it. And sin is usually appealing in some way. Even if it's like anger, we sin in our anger. Well, that's almost like a release, or some kind of, like, sometimes our anger, we get angry at someone and then we lash out. And then it's like we have won this, our brain thinks we have won this victory or something. And it kind of like, it must send off some kind of dopamine or something in our brains, right? Make us feel like, yes, vindicated or something like that. But then, then there's many, many, many other sins where it's like, yeah, this is either going to feel good or taste good or I don't know, look good, whatever. And he says, what kind of people were being enticed? What's the verse say? Verse 14? Unstable souls. Weak souls. I guess with any, if you take any just random snapshot of the church, anywhere in the world of a congregation, you're going to find weak Christians and you're going to find strong Christians. I suppose we could find a congregation that's got all weak Christians, and they're kind of on their way out, probably, from being the Lord's church. Maybe you could find a congregation with all strong Christians. I don't know. I would bet no on that. But you definitely find a congregation of the Lord's church. Snapshot of the church, you got strong and you weak. And look at Romans 15. I'm not just bringing that up. Romans 15 and verse 1 shows that this is the way the church is. It's just the way it is. And then like Romans 14 and 15 is kind of like telling us how to deal with that. At least the first part of 15 is. And so unstable souls, maybe weak Christians, new Christians, so it's up to us if I am this kind of spiritual soul, it's up to me to move away from any kind of instability in my faith and do it as quickly as possible. Because look what happens to unstable souls, Christians. How many times has that happened in the world, in a congregation, where you just kind of like the person, maybe they obey the gospel, but man, they're like just really hanging on by a thread because they don't like getting involved. They kind of only show up every now and then just the idea is like there's not really the kind of changes that being made in their lives. They're kind of really hanging on to a lot of old things. Well, how many times has something then come along and then just took them out, right? So the best way for us to not be an unstable soul is just to be consistently faithful. Like, don't let it out of your mind about who you are and your goals, your spiritual goals in life. because it's pretty easy. We talked about this before. It's pretty easy just to kind of forget who you are. Then all of a sudden, you've taken the bait with some sin, and then it's got you. Go ahead, Steve.
You'd have your new converts that are gonna be unstable to a certain point till they grow enough.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But yeah, you always have your other unstable that, they don't wanna get involved, they don't wanna do things. And the less they come, the more weak they get. Because without the Lord, they're not anything.
Yeah,
They stand on their own.
yeah, that's true. That's true. The teacher's greed comes up again. They have a heart trained in covetous practices. Yeah, I think that the idea is they've been doing it for a while. And then they're called accursed children, or children, literally children of cursing. And this, I think Peter's probably pulling from the Old Testament. You got phrases like children of Belial, which is like children of worthlessness. That's how that's translated. And that's a lot in the Old Testament. Sons are children of wickedness, children of transgression in Isaiah, children of whoredoms in Hosea. Now, this idea of, in the Old Testament, to be cursed, as the Old Testament uses that word, cursed, has to do with God's judgment. And you check me out now. You look through all the times in the Old Testament where this idea of cursing happens, and see how it's many times it's connected with like being ripe for God's judgment, like deserving God's punishment. And so these teachers here are accursed children. They certainly are deserving of, because of what they've been doing, they certainly are deserving of God's divine judgment. Let me read this passage and we'll stop. Ephesians 5 and verse 6 is very similar. Paul, this is Peter writing to the church. Paul writes a lot of the similar things that Peter does. And he says this to the Ephesians 5 and verse 6. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things, the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Very similar. All right, we'll pick up with verse 15. Next time we meet, thanks, everybody.